I'm Jonathan Rivers, CTO of 3 Pillar Global. I like to build things, software very specifically, and I think what we're going to talk about today is how to build things successfully to actually get market share and stand a chance in the marketplace. And that is still weird. I think they love the sizzle reel and just the idea of all the stuff that we do. And maybe why, we know a thing or two about product development. So I will let this finish. Right. So, like I said, I love building things, and I knew there was no way I was going to get through Black Hat without using the term cyber. It's sort of very prevalent, and they threw it one of the slide titles, and it was interesting when I thought about it. Cyber, the term, was coined in 1984 by William Gibson in his book Neuromancer. It's one of my favorite books. I read it at least once a year. And 1984, he wrote a story about a group of criminals who were paid by an AI and given state-created malware to break it out of its mainframe and release it out on the internet. Now, in 1984, this sounded like high science. I think today it is scarily possible. And it frames a lot of what you think about in security, especially with the rise of AI and its uses in defense, but also how far away or how soon it can actually be used for attack vectors as well. And so the security field's super crowded. There's a lot of different aspects, a lot of different approaches. There are probably more than 2,000 companies in the cybersecurity field right now. There are probably going to be another 200 coming in next year. And when you think about that, that's a very crowded space, a lot of competition and a lot of attention and trying to get eyeballs. But what's great about the security space is there are no industry-winning ideas, right? There are so many aspects to the field that you're not seeing one particular idea over any other really dominating and taking the market share. All the companies in this space have one mission, which is really protecting the estate. So I need to build something that is going to help people protect the estate. And so with that in mind, they have to differentiate themselves. They have to try and stand out from the crowd and get noticed. And the problem with startups or sort of being a technologist, somebody who creates software for a living in the security field, is the buyers are enterprise buyers. They are CISOs, they are CIOs, they are CTOs, they are large IT establishments who are very slow to purchase. It is a considered purchase. They do a lot of research. They have PMOs, they have purchasing departments to try and contain and corral the sales process. They do RFPs. They are very deliberate. They don't act like startups. And they don't buy software like startups do. So how do people who are existing in the startup world and having to hustle and get to market, get the attention, get through to an enterprise IT buyer? It's a huge challenge and something that everyone really needs to focus on. And so the way they get through is with an idea. They have a new idea, a new way of protecting the estate, something that somebody else hasn't done, or they have a fantastic algorithm. They have built an AI, machine learning-based application that is going to set them apart from the crowd and do things that were previously impossible. And we're actually in a ripe moment for that to happen. The rise in ubiquitous compute, as well as the advances in machine learning and the storage for the data needed to do it, AI applications are becoming increasingly prevalent. If you look at the top 20 startups in 2018, 50% of them are AI builds. And so you're seeing the algorithm or the idea really being a driver for growth and getting through to the space. The problem with that is you're not actually building an algorithm, right? You're not building an idea. You're building a product. And so you need to focus on the fact that it has to do something for someone. It has to be usable. It's a product. And I think we get so consumed in the intellectual property that we're creating that we forget to actually focus on the product itself. And that's where companies run into significant amounts of problems. This is where startups fail, where they end up so fixated on the algorithm itself that they're not worried about the product that they're making, and their companies go under. Or they don't actually go under, they become zombie companies, which I think is a slightly worse fate, right? They have a number of customers, they have a product in the market, but it stalls out. It's not keeping pace with the threats, it's not keeping pace with the attacks, the market has rejected the idea, or one of the large bundled providers has come through and mimicked the functionality and taken the market share. And so you have a company that isn't differentiated, that might have some customers, but doesn't actually have any chance of really garnering any new investment, doing an IPO, or getting acquired. They just stall out. And that's a huge, huge problem. You see it with startups time and time again. They get a lot of press early on, they get to the market, and then a year, 2 years, 3 years, you just don't ever know what happened with them. And I think a lot of times right now, it's going in a very, very particular order, and I hear this day in, day out, right? I've got some log files. Great. I've got machine learning. Awesome. I'm gonna do something, and then we're gonna make a lot of money. And they forget that we're gonna do something is actually the hard part. Those 3 little dots, you'll have to pardon the South Park joke. I still think it's germane and love doing it. Those 3 little dots are the important part, right? It's the space between the AI, the space between the logs, and what you have done with it that's going to stand a chance of whether or not you're successful in the marketplace. And I'm talking a little bit about failure, and nobody actually is coming to hear anything about failure. They're probably more interested in talking about success, or what can I do to avoid this, or how do I build a better product, how do I get to market, how do I be successful. And the path to glory, whoops, that is wrong. The path to glory is unbelievably simple, right? There are 3 things that time and time again will make you more successful in the marketplace if you do them, and that's really what all of this is about and what I want to talk about. The first is making data-driven decisions. Now, as computer scientists, people in an unbelievably complex field, I am always amazed at the number of people who make decisions based on opinion or sort of seniority rather than with data. The second thing that is going to set you apart and give you a good chance is a relentless focus on your customer. And you're seeing this with all of the internet startups and the best of breed applications who are hyper serving their customer base and dominating markets. It's why Amazon is where they are. They focus so very heavily on their customer. And the third thing that will give you a fighting chance out in the market is minimizing time to value. Right? Getting something valuable out into the marketplace, generating revenue as quickly as humanly possible. It is key. Again, it is a crowded market space. There are going to be a lot of people behind you. If you're not in the market, you're not going to be around and somebody might beat you there. So that in mind, number 1, making data-driven decisions, and this is huge with me. My teams get exceptionally annoyed with me because I tend to talk about it a lot. And when they come to me with an idea for a product, or they come to me for an idea with a feature or how they want to implement something, I ask one question: what data do you have to back that up? And if they don't have data, I send them off and tell them to come back when they do. If you don't have data about your idea or what you want to do, at best, it's a hunch, and at worst, it's an opinion. And neither of those are liable to make you successful time and time again. There's a place for hunches, there's a place for intuition, but that's not a strategy. That's serendipity, that's luck, it's not reliable time and time again. What's reliable is using data to inform all of the decisions that you're making. And you do that by embedding analytics into your application. Analytics are not just for websites. It's not just about total unique visitors and bounce rate. You need to be baking analytics into every part of your application, right? So you have an application. Imagine you have a very, very simple application. It has 4 features, only 4 features. If you had analytics in there, what would happen if you found out that 75% of your customer base only used 1 feature? What would that tell you? Those other 3 features, are they wasted effort? Do your customers not like them? Do they not want them? Have you wasted a lot of money developing 3 things when you could have done number 1 even better? You're not going to get those sorts of insights unless you actually have analytics helping you make those decisions. Too often, decisions about what to implement are made by either the loudest or the most senior person in the room. And that's a huge, huge trap because that's full with bias, right? That's their knowledge, that's what they want, it's what they're thinking of, not what the customers are actually doing. And you get there when you have analytics embedded in, right? When you can actually see what they're using, you know what they're responding to, what they want more of, and how they're actually using your product so you can make it better. The second part of making data-driven decisions is validating your ideas. And idea validation is huge, and it's done wrong in so many product companies that it's painful to me. It's done in a very old school way. So I am the CTO. I will walk down the hall and I will say, Jennifer, what do you think of my idea for a new product? And she will say, you're the CTO, you're brilliant. This is a great idea. You should do that. Yes. And I go down the other hall and I say, Scott, what do you think of my very great idea? And Scott says, well, you signed my paycheck, so yeah. I want to keep my job. I think it's a good idea. And this is how ideas were validated. It's absolute sort of narcissism at best, and you know, it's not a great way to do it. What you want to do is get outside your organization, because if you're in your company asking the people around you whether or not an idea is good or if something should be implemented that way, it's an echo chamber. Right? This is mission driven. We're all in this for one particular business, and the company that you've built is full of like-minded people. And so they're going to respond to your idea because you're all part of the same zeitgeist at the same time. Idea validation is really simple. You want to get the idea out to the customer who is actually going to use it. And it doesn't have to be a heavyweight research project. It can be incredibly light touch, 7 to 10 touches. Take a drawing, a wireframe, go have a conversation with somebody and find out if the idea actually is any good, if the implementation is any good. Do they like it? Would they use it? Would they buy it? It can be done really fast to find out whether or not you have a shot in the marketplace. And we did that fairly recently for one of our clients who came to me with a fantastic idea. It's actually one of the coolest ideas I've heard in the last couple of years. I mean, it's totally sweet. So he comes to me and he says, we have this idea to help surgeons in the operating room. I want to build an AI-based application that's going to help surgeons understand what to do if they run into complications during surgery. So right now, if a surgeon runs into a problem, they are limited to their knowledge and what they could possibly do to help the patient. What I want to do is use AI to look at all the different permutations and make suggestions to them, right? Fantastic idea. He wanted to raise money, he's going to build a startup, and we said we could help. So first thing we did is we said, let's go out to the market and validate the idea. And he said, no. All right, I know what I'm doing. This is my idea. I don't want anybody hearing about it. And we were able to convince him to do it. And so we went out to the market and we talked to some surgeons, we talked to some doctors about what he wanted to build to get their feedback just on the idea itself. And what we found out was surprising. 70% of the people that we talked to hated the idea. So we actually went and talked to more people to get a better sample size and do a little more research because we didn't want to go back to our customer with, hi, everybody thinks your idea is bad. So we went and talked to more people. Again, same thing. Don't like the idea, it's not any good. And when we started drilling down into it, it wasn't good for 2 reasons. There were 2 camps of people, 2 beliefs. The first was, I will never trust a machine to tell me what to do. And this is incredibly common in all intelligent agent applications. It doesn't matter the industry. It can be online advertising, it can be security, it can be medicine. People don't want to believe what a machine tells them unless there's good explainability in an AI, right? Why is it making those choices? Why should I do that? So the first group hated the idea. They would never trust a machine. They would go with their own intuition and knowledge. The second group was even more informative. What they told us was, it will never work because you can't get the data. And we said, what do you mean? So all the data that you need to make this work is in multiple healthcare provider systems. And so you would have to get deals with all of them to get that data. And if you could get that data, you would find out that it is completely unstructured. And it is in any number of formats. And worse, and they laughed, they said, most of it is handwritten. Now, if you've ever had a doctor's note or a prescription, there is not an OCR application on the planet that is going to be able to parse and process that. And so we took this back to our client, who decided to actually pivot his startup. He said, you know what, I'm going to start and solve the data problem, and how do I unify that and get all of that, and then I will work on the AI much, much later when we have the good data to feed it. And so he was able to pivot and save himself years, time, investors' money, reputation in the market, because he took the time to go out and talk about the idea and find out it was a great idea, right? I mean, we can all see the merits of what an AI could do to help that, but he hadn't vetted out the problem thoroughly, and that's why you take the time to do it. It'll save you from having to re-pivot 6 months, 12 months down the road when your idea is already out there and your competitors are following you. So, idea validation, data-driven designs, huge. The second thing that is equally important is a relentless focus on the customer, and that's tough. It's tough for us as technologists, it's tough for us as companies, because as technologists, we fall in love with our applications, right? We fall in love with what we've built. We want to make it faster, we want to make it better, we want to make it more accurate. We get very, very consumed with it. We fall into the trap that Pygmalion, the Greek sculptor, fell into, right? He fell in love with his statue and kept shaping it for him, rather than for the art that it was supposed to provide. And we have to do that with our clients if we want any chance of succeeding. There's a reason Amazon leaves a chair open at every meeting to remind them that they are in service of the customer, and that's huge, right? When we build these products, it has to be about the people who are going to use them, because if it's about us, we don't know that they're going to want it, right? It might be implemented the way I want, it may be implemented the way I like, but am I paying for the software, and are there enough of me's that are going to buy it? And so that's why you tend to take the time to really focus on them. And in doing that, I think there are 3 commandments that we believe in very, very heavily and talk about often in terms of servicing the customer, and that's making it usable, useful, and desirable, right? The product that we build has to be usable. They have to be able to get in and get their job done. They have to be able to do it without too much pain. It has to be fast. Every action that we take to reduce a click, to reduce the amount of information, to allow somebody to respond to a threat more quickly, to be able to get the data that they need, to be able to take a course without losing their mind, is going to make them more successful in their job. The second thing is it has to be useful. It has to do something of value. It has to solve a very real problem. There are lots of great ideas out there that are great on paper, but if they don't actually solve somebody's problem, they're not worth it. And so when we look at these products, is it actually useful? Does it solve a very real need? Think about it. Is this going to make my customer more successful, right? Because when you make your customer more successful, they buy more things, you have better chances, they give you referrals, life goes on. It's fantastic. And the third is desirable. And desirable is interesting because 10 years ago, desirable meant pretty. I mean, if you think about the early, mid-2000s and everybody trying to make everything pixel perfect pretty, that was what desirable was, and that's not what it is. Desirable means they have to have a reason to want to use the product, right? Again, it has to make them successful. They have to want to engage in it and use it to go and sort of do their job. And these 3 things feed into each other, right? If it's not useful, And if it's not usable, it's not going to be desirable. And so we want our customers to be engaged with our products, because when they're engaged with our products, they're actually accomplishing their mission. They're either learning, they are reporting on threats, they are stopping threats. And we have to focus not, again, just on that algorithm, that set of math that says, all right, this is what's actually going on, but how do you interact with that? Can you get what you need out of the system? It's hugely, hugely important. And doing all of that means you have to know who your customer is. And this is important because there's a huge difference between your customer and your buyer, right? The buyer might be a CIO. The buyer might be a CISO. It might be a CEO. It might be a CTO. That's the buyer. And they're not actually using the software day in, day out, right? You want to focus on the people who are actually using the software, because when they are successful, when they like the software, when they are getting value out of it, they will continue to push the buyer why they actually need that. And it's a bit of a shift, right? Because we think a lot of these software or buys are B2B, right? But almost all of them are B2B to C. You want to focus on that end audience and what they actually need and how they're going to use it, so that way they're successful, and then you get renewals and more market share. And with that in mind, I think there are two other things that are essentially important. The first is actually knowing that customer and who they are and who they're going to use it. Are they a baby boomer? Are they Gen X? Are they a millennial? Are they Gen Z? It really matters who they are in how you design that application, because they all interact with software differently. The baby boomers barely interact with it. They still like paper. Gen X, we're writing the software. We're okay with that. Millennials, they have really different expectations, and I'll talk about that in a second. And think about Gen Z for a second. Kids growing up right now at 8 years old are getting an iPad in school. This iPad follows them through their entire stint in the school system, and they do all of their homework in it, and they interact in it. They don't actually know how to use a keyboard. This is how they type, right? They're all on their phones. A lot of the millennials are on the phones, and this isn't a dig against millennials. It's just how they want to work. It's how they like to work. Are we designing the application with them in mind, so that way they know how to use it, they are comfortable to use it, and they want to use it? And the third thing is fascinating when you think about it. All enterprise applications now, everything that we use at work is judged by best of breed consumer experience. So every application we use at work, we are expecting the same sort of functionality that we get out of Instagram and Spotify and Booking.com and Expedia, right? We expect all of these applications to have that level of polish, that level of usability, the same sort of focus on them that they're getting from the internet companies. They're expecting products in the enterprise, so they're expecting their HRIS system to work that way. That's why Workday is killing it in the market, right? They're expecting their expense systems. And the products that they have to use day in, day out, the products that we're designing here and in this space, I mean, this is stuff that people have to use 4-6 hours a day. They expect it to work like everything else in their life, and you want to make sure that you're conscious of that. And third, you want to make sure you get to market, and you get to market fast. This is one of the key elements, because software in a code repository has no value, right? A product that is not out in market, being used, generating revenue, doing something has no value. You have to focus on what can I do to get out as quickly as humanly possible. And the first part of that is minimizing time to value. Time is linear, time is finite, right? It never stops. It always moves, it never stops, and it can never be regained. And I heard something interesting the other day where somebody was talking about time is the greatest luxury that the human race has, right? It's considered a luxury, not a necessity, not a right, it's a luxury. We can always go out and raise more money. If we've got a really good idea and we can sell very, very well, we can go raise more money, but you can't raise more time. Once that clock is ticking, once an idea is out there, once things are out in the market, you have to continue to move to innovate and capture market share, and time is against you in that entire process. And with that in mind, money is the second reason you want to get to market as quickly as humanly possible. And I talk to this to my developers all the time. It was an analogy that I made to really help them visualize this. If you think about a stack of dollars on the table, every feature that they implement, every decision that they make starts taking dollars off that table. And if you run out of money before the things that you have built start putting money on the table, the business is done. It doesn't matter if they were good ideas. It doesn't matter if it was the best, most scalable implementation of anything ever. If it's not something that actually provided value to the client that they were willing to pay for before we had taken all of the dollars, you're sunk. And think about that with ID validation, and think about that with the analytics, right? If you don't know what decisions you're making and you don't know whether or not they're going to generate revenue, you're going to deplete those dollars vastly faster than you will if you're making good informed decisions. And good informed decisions are absolutely huge. They are essential. Like I said, it's a crowded space, and there are any number of companies vying for market share. And I heard a story about an interview of a journalist with a CIO of a major bank. And the journalist asked the CIO, how many network providers do you have? And he said 2. Great. How many SAN providers do you have? He said 2. It's like, how many data center companies do you work with? And he said 2. Look, he's like, I'm getting irritated here, right? I have redundancy. I make sure I work with, multiple vendors, and I want to keep that under control. And the journalist said, great. How many security vendors do you have? And he said 200. Now, think about that. That's 200 companies that's already in the bank that have MSAs in place. They are papered. They are already gone through purchasing. They have gone through all of the hoops to be in that bank. And so they are rapidly developing. They have a little easier access to the market because they're already there. And so you're going to have to try and break into that. You have to be different. You have to focus on what their needs are to be successful, to really keep that competition at bay. And once you have that idea, and once you have that algorithm or an approach that is going to differentiate you, and you've talked about it, there's a press release, you have your first clients, your competitors are going to be right behind you. They are going to be right behind you, and the cycle times get shorter and shorter for them to catch up with you. If I had a nickel for everybody who comes to me telling me they are going to be the next Airbnb of X, I would be a millionaire. And just think about that as an example. So Airbnb, the idea is just selling excess capacity, right? That's really all the idea is. And so it can be infinitely copied. It can be infinitely riffed. Anything that you have capacity of that you are not using, you can sell on an open marketplace. And so all of these companies have started that. And as they build out the ability to sell excess capacity, there's no reason they can't go after Airbnb. If they've built good software, it's just going from one market to another market to another market. And that's why you want to get out fast and continue to innovate so that you can stay ahead of your competitors, those people who are going to lag behind you, because the innovation onus is going to be on you in that space. And I talk about everybody copying Airbnb and copying that idea. I want to talk about copying in a different sense. It's hugely problematic in too many industries where an executive will say, we need all of the features that our competitors have to get into the market, right? Those guys, we want to take them out. Everything that they have, I need. Or it's in an RFP because they have it, and so we need to go through and check box this exercise. And what happens usually is a BA gets dispatched, and they somehow get a login to their competitor's system, and they make a very, very large spreadsheet with all of the features that that customer has. And it becomes this enormous list that goes to the development team to toil over and to build. And it's a trap and a huge, huge problem because you don't know why those features exist. You've gained no learning. You don't actually know why any of those features exist, and that's hugely problematic. So you've got this long list. You don't know if your competitor validated the ideas, right? Did they actually talk to anyone? Do they know if their ideas are good? You don't know if they have analytics based on it, right? They don't know if it's being used. Is it valuable to their customers? It's merely a line item on a spreadsheet. You don't know what order they built that in. And so what is going to be valuable to your customers? What is going to be that smallest thing that you can get to get into the marketplace? Imagine a list of 100. What if you picked the wrong 10 to build first, right? You haven't validated the idea. You haven't gone through the learning process. You want to get out there early so that you can iterate. Working software, again, in people's hands that your clients are using. What's the smallest valuable thing that they'll pay for, that they can integrate easily, and get that out there, because then they will come to you with what else they need. And the other companies like them, the companies that are their sister companies or their competitors, they very well might need that as well. And so you're now making informed decisions about what you're building based on what you've learned from your own application and what your paying clients are telling you to do, not just copying a very, very long list of things that everybody else. So that's a lot of sort of talking and information about how to be successful. And I think, you know, again, just having an idea or an algorithm is a start. That is a beginning. That is a starting place for the build to happen. And the journey from there to actually being out in market and being successful, again, really takes a lot of focus on the productization of the idea, the actual implementation itself, right? There's a crowded market. There are any number of customers who are companies that have similar and same ideas. So what are you going to have to differentiate yourself, to get that market share, to get that attention, to actually stand a chance to win some hearts and minds? Look, making data-driven designs or data-driven decisions, actually using fact and science to decide what to build, focusing on the customer. Don't focus on yourself. Don't focus on what you want. Focus on what the market wants. Focus on what people are actually who are going to use the software want. And then finally, move fast, right? Move fast. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. I have seen sales teams and marketing teams time and time again say this is not big enough, right? We can't launch until we have all of these things. That's a trap. If you have one feature that somebody will pay for, charge less for it, but get it out there. It does not have to have everything. And so with that in mind, I will thank you all. Sure. Do we have questions? Is there anything I can answer for anyone or that they would like to know? Or do they want finite and precious time back? All right. Time it is. Look, if you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me if I can ever be of any assistance. I am always happy to help. I'm a giant nerd about this stuff. I love building things and helping people build things. So if I can be help, let me know, but thank you mostly for coming out and listening. Ma'am. Yeah, I don't think it's happening enough. I think UX is incredibly new in the security space. Because it's such a highly technical field, there's this assumption, this base assumption that the people who use the software are smart and can handle complications. And it couldn't be further from the truth. They might be able to handle the complication, but that doesn't mean they're efficient with it, right? There's this focus on intelligence and smart, and it's a technical problem that highly technical people face where you sort of judge people based on how hard a thing they can use, and so it's harder. I had a developer sort of years ago who I tried to explain to him, he had every option on one page, right? So every option you could possibly want in the software on one page. And I went to him and I said, look, we're going to split this up into 5 tabs. Let's find out what everybody uses the most. We'll put it on the first tab, and then we'll hide everything in subsequent tabs. And he goes, Jonathan, can I ask you a question? And I said, yes. Are your users stupid? And I said, what? He said, are your users stupid? And I said, no. And he's like, then why can't they handle all the options on one page? Why should we hide anything? And that's what we do to each other, and because it's a technology buy and it's an enterprise IT buy, there's this weird rite of passage. And the idea of dumbing down software to make it faster and easier to use is very new here, right? It's very new. It's incredibly important. As the number of cybersecurity jobs go up, the barrier to entry is going to go down, right? To fill all the jobs, to get all the people, they're going to have to get less skilled and less technical people, and it's a change that's going to have to happen.
And then maybe as you mentioned also in the ages, there's Gen Zs and millennials, their expectations are so much higher.
Yeah.
No matter how skilled or unskilled they are, their expectations are such that I think you mentioned the Amazon, the Airbnb, that's their expectation even at work.
Yeah, they expect the app to be just like everything on their phone. In fact, they probably expect it to be on their phone, so that way they can go for a vape break and not miss an alert or respond to things. The number of people that I see actually working on their phone rather than their computer is huge these days, and I think it's just a change the industry is going to have to grapple with. I do not. I know that's. I know it's a thing.
I guess so if you don't have some of those numbers, do you have just in your experience as you work with a lot of companies and a lot of technologies, what are you seeing in terms of what the trends are and maybe just even in the companies that you're working with?
Sure.
What is the trend in the last 12 months or so?
So I'll give you an example from the media space where for a very large content website, they had an authoring system to get content onto the website. To get a single piece of content onto the website, it took 87 steps and 55 minutes, right? That is a very complicated, laborious process, and if anything went wrong, you would either have to start over or get confused. We did a huge UX assessment and focused on it, went and talked to the people who were actually putting the content into the system, not their bosses, said, how do you work, what do you do, how is a story created, what pictures do you need, how is it put online? We created a new authoring system, right, just a reskinned authoring system that took it down to 30 minutes and 20 steps to get a piece of content online. And so you can actually convert the ROI in that in man hours from the amount of work or the number of content editors that you need to have just in the sheer amount of time. I mean, we reduced 50% time, and you look at how much you pay somebody, how long it takes them to perform an action, the ROI for UX pays for itself almost immediately. All right. Thank you, everybody.